Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us Dr. James Dobson, of course, the founder of Focus on the Family, now national radio host, of course, also involved with writing still, recently a new book out, Your Legacy, The Greatest Gift. We'll talk a little bit about that on the show. Dr. Dobson, we're honored to have you with us on the show. Thank you for being with us.
Joe, it's a pleasure. I think we talked once before, and then, of course, I endorsed you in your bid for the senatorial seat, and I was disappointed to see how it turned out, but it's good to talk to you today.
I very much thank you for that and appreciate the stand that you're taking, not just in a few political races, but most importantly in what you're doing and sounding the alarm in what's going on with American culture, American morality. We've got a lot of different issues that are facing this country today. Homosexual marriage, of course, making inroads currently before the Supreme Court, a pending decision as to whether or not to impose a requirement of gay marriage in all the states. Where do you think that's headed, and what do you think the implications are for the country?
Well, it's one of my greatest concerns, Joe, and it is actually linked to other things that are on my heart. I'm concerned about the institution of marriage and the family. I don't know if you knew that I was a professor of pediatrics at USC School of Medicine until 1977, and I did a scary thing. I resigned from that coveted position because I saw where the family was going, and I saw actually don't want to sound like Father Time here, but I saw where the homosexual activist community wanted to take marriage, and that it was aimed at the institution of marriage and the family itself. And I believe that marriage is the bedrock of Western civilization, and now they're crumbling right before our eyes. And it's the foundation of everything, in every continent on earth. But we're seeing it unraveling today, and that really does cause me alarm.
You know, sometimes when you take a step aside from what's going on in this country, take an overview internationally, you're a little surprised. We had a guest on several weeks ago who works within the United Nations against kind of the left agenda there. And, of course, there are all sorts of progressives trying to impose their agenda on the rest of the world. But he mentioned to me, he said, look, Joe, there are 15 countries worldwide that have legalized gay marriage, only one by judicial act. I think he should have made that, too, because we've had now 30 states, most of which have been imposed by judicial action, gay marriage. But he said, the wealth of the world, of the population of the world, is for traditional values. But it's the United States that's kind of leading the charge to impose upon them a different view. Do you think that the United States, at least internationally, is, well, I shouldn't say the United States, I don't even want to characterize it that way, but the battle for marriage internationally, have you followed that much, and where do you think that's headed?
Well, it's right here. In fact, I served on the President's Commission on Pornography in the 80s, and America was behind the movement to spread hardcore and violent pornography around the world in those days, and now it is the undermining of marriage. I think there are 18, as I have counted them, there are 18 countries that have legalized gay marriage or homosexual same-sex marriage, and America is about to become number 19 if the court watchers are accurate. In June of this year, maybe early July, the U.S. Supreme Court, in its arrogance, is about to undermine a definition that's been in place for 5,000 years. As I said before, in every continent on earth, it's been honored in law and custom all over the country, all over the world. And there have been nations where homosexuality flourished for a time, Sodom and Gomorrah in Greece and Rome and other places. But for the most part, it has been defined as being between one man and one woman. And now all of a sudden, our appointed, unelected, for-life justices, or at least 5 of them, it appears, have a better idea. And it doesn't matter what religious beliefs are, they're going to jam it down our throats. And I am just very troubled by what that means. Joe, I'd like to emphasize that whatever the court winds up doing, there's one thing that your listeners must be aware of, and that's that this is not the end of the matter. This will simply be the beginning, and it's the beginning of bad things. It will affect religious liberty, which you mentioned before. It will affect the schools, how the textbooks are written, and what information that kids are given from kindergarten on. It will result in dragging churches and people of faith into court. Pastors very well may be required by law to perform marriages with same-sex couples. If they refuse to do so, there could be all kinds of implications, both financially and in terms of even prison. So I could give you a list of 20 more things, but it's going to be the beginning of a change of Western civilization for the worst.
You mentioned earlier that the court was shoving this down our throats. I mean, I've, of course, not been as long-term a watcher as you, Dr. Dobson, on this issue, but over the years have perceived this as being kind of the elite's issue that they wanted to impose on the country. And when this started, of course, the vast majority of Americans against gay marriage, against even homosexual rights. Now it's shifted dramatically up until the point, I think it was yesterday, that Gallup released a poll showing a 5% jump in the number of Americans supporting gay marriage from 55% to 60%. And of course, you can manipulate polls all day long, but Gallup's been fairly reliable historically. Do you think, as far as public opinion goes, that the battle is lost on this issue?
It does have that feeling, and that's why we have to be praying for our country. I saw that poll yesterday, and it depressed me because, in 2012, that's 3 years ago, there were only 6 states that recognized same-sex marriage, only 6. And now there are 37. It's an avalanche. It's amazing how quickly the culture has turned upside down. And it's because everything from the President of the United States on down have thrown everything they had at it. And the American people have finally gotten tired of it, and it looks like maybe a majority of them have just thrown up their hands and said, well, it seems to be a good idea. Let's go with it. And that really does disturb me because, in the last 10 years or so, there have been 31 states in the United States that have voted on the definition of marriage. 31 states, and all 31 of them voted for traditional marriage between a man and a woman. 31. And those decisions were put into the state constitutions. And look at it now. Just a short time later, Gallup says 60% of the people think it's a good idea. That tells you the hold that the leftist movement, and especially the media and the news media, have on the hearts and minds of the people. And the children are the ones that are going to pay a price for this.
You've probably seen the study or the report on long-term viewership of Will and Grace and how that impacted homosexual opinions or opinions toward homosexual marriage. There's no question that media has had an impact, but regrettably, Americans look to the law for morality now in many cases. And so there's no doubt that these judicial decisions have also had an impact. Now, one of the things, and we're getting ready to hit a break, but one of the things I'd like to just touch on before we go to commercial is that it seems that what has happened recently, especially the reaction in Indiana to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that the gay lobby just went virulent over, even though it was identical to what something like 30 other states already had on the books. It seems that many people of faith are suddenly taking notice that their liberties may be under threat. Of course, some already. I mean, you've got a number of business people that have been impacted adversely by this. But what I'd like to do is just touch briefly on, we've got 45 seconds before we go to break now, but do you see the future as far as liberty goes as being one that Christians should be very concerned about?
Well, I absolutely do, and it's not going to be done largely by the legislature, although it could. It will be because of the courts again, and that's where the danger lies.
All right, well, we'll talk more about that in the next segment. Some of the dangers that are out there, how people that are concerned about these issues are now reacting, recognizing that maybe they've been asleep too long. We'll talk more about that in just a few with Dr. James Dobson on The Joe Miller Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us Dr. James Dobson, the founder of Focus on the Family, recently author of the book Your Legacy, The Greatest Gift, and the DVD series Building a Family Legacy. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Dr. Dobson, thank you for staying with us, sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Joe, and I'd like to clarify that I am not with Focus on the Family now. I've been in another ministry. I started it the day after I left Focus on the Family in 2010. So we just celebrated our 5th anniversary. And the ministry that I started afterwards is called Family Talk. And it's easy to confuse us, but we're not the same organization.
As the founder of Family Talk, you've got a radio broadcast. It's hosted on, I'm sure, hundreds of stations nationwide, right?
It's over 1,000, but the exciting thing is what's happening on the internet. I mean, that's going through the roof.
Fantastic. Well, as long as it remains free, it's a great place to get information that the mainstream media doesn't control. We've been very successful with restoring liberty. It's been really the only place you can go in Alaska to get good conservative news, not tainted by those in the establishment. We were talking before the break about things that are going on and how the people are reacting, especially people of faith, people that are concerned about the traditional family, seeing that what this has become is something that is threatening potentially what they can do, their free exercise rights. They hear about the baker, they hear about the flower arranger, they hear about the photographer, the pizza group in Indiana, all of which gay agenda, gay lobby, trying to force them into doing things that violate their conscience. That has created what I can see in the blogosphere, and you've probably gotten some feedback on your sites and, of course, on the radio from folk. It seems that people are becoming much more outspoken now today about what is happening, and they're starting to sound the alarm. I find that encouraging. Are you hearing some of the same, or are you encouraged by what you're hearing?
Well, of course I am, and anyone who's paying attention at all has to be aware that religious liberty, which is written into the First Amendment of the Constitution, is just being ignored and run over. And I have experienced it, in fact. Family Talk was required, along with other nonprofit organizations around the country. Many people don't know this, but required to give contraceptives, provide them for our employees, even if they became what's called abortifacients. In other words, even if they resulted in the death of babies. And it's a form of abortion, and we simply can't do that. I mean, I would lay down my life before I would do that. And so they came at us and said it was going to cost us $38,000 per employee per year if we didn't comply with the law. This came from the Obama administration, they have been responsible for so much that's gone wrong in this country, in my view. I say that as a private individual, but that's the way I feel about it. And one of the things they tried to do was to force us to give abortifacients to our employees. I didn't say that very well, but that's what I was trying to say. And we just refused to do it very publicly, and I wrote a letter to the president and I said, Mr. President, this violates my conscience, and I consider it to be wrong and evil, and I will not comply with it, and here I am, come get me. Well, we wound up in a lawsuit against the federal government. Here we are, this Christian organization trying to do what God asked us to do, and we're in a federal lawsuit. And I'm here to tell you that the judge that handled that case ruled in our favor, and we don't have to comply with that law, at least not now. I think they're going to appeal it. They'll probably go to the Supreme Court. But that's what it comes down to. If you have deeply held convictions and beliefs about the fundamentals that are not negotiable, then you have the choice of, in our case, it would have just closed us down because we don't have that kind of money. And we just refused to do it. And thank God there was a judge who wrote a wonderful ruling that was based on the First Amendment. But everybody is going to be dealing with this one way or another. You can either ignore it, as most people have on that particular issue, or you can be like the Green family, that their case went all the way to the Supreme Court and they won it there. But that didn't apply to us because they're a for-profit company, and Family Talk is a nonprofit organization, and so we had to start from scratch to do the same thing. And so will others that are out there listening to us.
And I don't think that the progressive recognize that on these issues, these non-negotiable issues, that it's not like other areas of the law where they can leverage and bend and force. There's going to be significant conflict that arises with the federal government and, of course, in many cases, state and local governments trying to compel people to violate conscience. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're seeing such kind of a vocal response now in some conservative quarters to what's going on.
There are, but, Joe, there are not enough of them. There are many pastors that don't have a clue about what's taking place. I really believe, as I mentioned earlier, that pastors may be required to marry people of same sex. I don't know how soon that will occur or what the damages or the penalties will be, but I think they're coming. And we missed by one vote on the Supreme Court, having to hire people in the church that disagreed with us theologically. I say we, I mean all churches. But we won that by one justice. All we need is for one conservative justice to leave the court or to be too ill to participate and to get an appointment by President Obama or whoever follows him, and we will be in a mess. We're very close to losing our religious liberties.
Well, and of course, the discussion before the court on the issue of nonprofit status and whether or not a nonprofit that speaks out or takes action against gay marriage, whether or not they then would lose that status, using, of course, Bob Jones, the university there, as an analogy. And that the Supreme Court recognizes that that's next, depending on the outcome of that case.
I believe it is, and we've already seen, you mentioned them in the last segment, that, you've got a photographer who's the government has come down on, and a florist, and a baker, and others. It's already happening in the business community. Don't think it isn't going to happen in the church, because it's coming our way. And I talked to a very knowledgeable court watcher just last week who said that you better get ready for it. What's going to happen is you're going to lose your nonprofit status. And in a nonprofit organization, a tax exemption. That's what I meant to say.
Sure.
And that's coming. And so you're going to have to decide, can you survive? And if so, how? You're going to have to live on less, and you're going to have to be very frugal because it is very likely that elements of the church are going to have to pay taxes. That's one of the first things that's coming our way. I know we've depressed everybody today, and I'm sorry about that. I'm blunt because so few people seem to understand where we're headed. You talk about seeing a little hope. Well, I do within the conservative movement, but the vast majority of Americans don't get it. They don't yet realize that the America that was given to us by our founding fathers and handed to us with this wonderful biblical background to the things that they gave us with our Constitution is changing, and it's rapidly being assaulted.
Dr. Dobson, I appreciate that perspective. I want to talk in this next segment about your book, Your Legacy, The Greatest Gift, as well as the DVD series, maybe some other related issues. Appreciate you agreeing to stay with us. The Joe Miller Show, back after these messages. Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. Dr. Dobson is with us. He's been very generous with his time. Appreciate, Dr. Dobson, you taking the time to share your thoughts with the people of Alaska.
I've enjoyed it, Joe, and I think these topics are just highly relevant to where we are as a nation.
No doubt about it. I want to get into what your effort is with respect to your book, Your Legacy, The Greatest Gift, as well as your DVD series, Building a Family Legacy. But we've had a caller that's been waiting on the line now for almost 15 minutes. So you've agreed to take a call. I appreciate that courage. Amy, welcome to the Joe Miller Show.
Hey, thanks, Joe. And thank you, Dr. Dobson. I want to tell you how much of an influence you've been on my life for the last almost 45 years, probably. And I am just so thankful for what you have done in your service for the Lord to the people. I want to tell you that many, many, many years ago, I heard you say, and I don't even remember if it was on your radio program from Focus on the Family or if it was at a seminar or what, but you said this little thing, and it has stuck with me all these years later, and it was, more is caught than taught. And
by children.
Yeah, it is such a phenomenal thing. When you talk to your kids, they catch more than you teach them by your life. And so that's such phenomenal insight, and I just thank God for you. And I want to tell you two things. Joe and Kathleen Miller are most beloved people here in Alaska. We just love Joe and Kathleen and their service, not only to Alaska, but the nation, and their commitment first to our Lord Jesus Christ and then to serving our nation as the Lord would call them. So I thank God for them. But I also want to say one thing, too. My husband and I, had the very distinct honor of hosting and chauffeuring around Pastor Raphael Cruz last summer for an entire week. And I'll tell you what, one of the best weeks of our whole life almost. And we just so enjoyed them. So we're really, really praying for Pastor Cruz and also, of course, the son and everything. So anyway, I just wanted to say that, and blessings to you, and hope all is well for you and everything.
Well, those are very, very kind words, and it raises my spirits. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I can tell from Joe's words and the things that he does and says that he deeply committed to Christian truth, and it's a pleasure talking to him. That's why I'm dedicated or allowed 3 segments of my time today, because it's definitely worth it. Now, in regard to Pastor Cruz, I was in Washington, D.C. until 2 nights ago, and I spent 90 minutes with Ted Cruz, and I had an opportunity to talk to him about many of the things that I believe. And I can't speak for my organization, my ministry, Family Talk, but I can speak as a private individual and tell you that that guy's the real deal. I'm really just getting acquainted with him, but I sure like what I hear.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate that. Amy, thank you for your call and your honoring words. Appreciate the fight that you and Gary are taking. Dr. Dobson, Amy's been very active in politics in Alaska and very aggressive in pushing forward the things that the state needs to do to get back on track, so we appreciate her efforts. We don't have a lot of time left, Dr. Dobson, but your book, Your Legacy, The Greatest Gift, as well as your DVD series, Building a Family Legacy. I mean, these are cornerstones of what you're doing right now. I'd like you to tell our audience a little bit about what you did with these, why, and how they can get a copy, why they should have a copy of these.
Well, Joe, I've written about 40 books through the years, and this is the most important one. This film series is the fourth or fifth film series that I've done. It's actually a DVD series, and it is on the same theme as the book. And the essence of it is that the most important responsibility we have as parents, above everything else, even health and welfare and everything else you can do for your children, the most important thing is to introduce them to Jesus Christ. And if you don't get that done, and the sooner the better, and they eventually grow up and die not knowing Jesus Christ, you'll never see them again. I know that's scary, but that's how, I mean, if that doesn't put it in perspective, I don't know what does. So you have to give your best effort and best thought to the spiritual foundation that you leave. That's the legacy. That's the greatest gift. And I've talked a lot in this book and in the film series about how to do that.
And where can people get a copy?
The DVD series is, well, both the book and the DVD series are available in Christian bookstores, from Amazon and from others, I think Walmart and others. But if you can't get it in your area, then contact us by the internet, by Dr. James Dobson's family, drjamesdobsonsfamilytalk.com. And everything that we're doing is available on that internet. By the way, people can hear my radio program every day, 5 days a week, with my son Ryan, who is a co-host, and you can hear it every day on an app. And all you have to do is get the app on there. I can't tell you on the air here how to do it, but you hit one button and then you have access to the program 24 hours straight. So it's more than you'll ever want to know. But go ahead.
And I'm sure that you can get that app from your site. Your site again, the website?
Dr. James Dobson's FamilyTalk.com.
So, Dr. Dobson, we just have about a minute left. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect from Dr. Dobson over, I guess, actually 2 minutes. My producer just corrected me. What can we expect from Dr. Dobson over the next 5 years or so? Do you have any plans that are different from what you've been doing over the last several years?
No, my plans are the same as they've been for, I think, 37 years since I left the university, and that is to introduce people to Christ, to help them raise their kids, to help them stay married, and to defend righteousness in the culture. And that's the mission of my life, and I will continue to do it for as long as the Lord allows me.
And those are critical areas of the battle that we have to undertake. Right now, everything, traditional values, the family, completely under assault, it seems like, at every avenue. And we need people that are out there, outspoken like you. We appreciate the efforts that you've taken on that and recognize that you're a leader in that area. And I'll continue to appreciate the direction that you've given on this and continue to obviously push folk in your direction so that they can understand what we need to do in this country.
Joe, if I can say in closing, to get people to pray. This is a time for prayer. And I believe in prayer. My wife Shirley is chairman of the National Day of Prayer. Take this matter to your knees, because that's really the only way we're going to win this fight.
That was going to be my last question to you. What's your guidance for us? And it couldn't be better. Appreciate that, Dr. Dobson. Again, what you've been doing, the wisdom of your words, and look forward to hearing more great things from you, more great works. Make sure that you get your legacy, the greatest gift from Dr. Dobson, as well as his DVD series, Building a Family Legacy. I appreciate it again, Dr. Dobson, the generosity of your time with our show.
Thank you for having me on. And Amy, if you're still listening, I'd like to meet you sometime. You sound like a great lady.